Good evening, I'm Michael Grant. A proposal to allow Mexican and other Latin American people to hold seasonal jobs in our state may soon be introduced in Congress. Senator John Kyle, Congressman Jim Colby, working on the legislation to establish a guest worker pilot program. The immediate aim is to get needed workers for farm labor. The ultimate goal, as we learn in the following report, is to help the hospitality industry. Joining me to talk about the idea of a guest worker program are Nic Suriel, an immigration attorney for Friendly House, local organization that helps immigrants, Ken Evans, a rancher, longtime grower, president of the Arizona Farm Bureau, and Kat Drum, a recruitment and employment manager for the Camelback Inn, Marriott Mountain Shadow Resorts. It's good to see all of you. Nic, there are some laws currently that allow for seasonal worker importation. Why don't they work?
They don't work because of the cumbersome nature of getting the employer and the employee and through the system, basically. And it doesn't address the large needs that we have. Unfortunately, we have a system with the INS that takes a lot of time to do any type of processing, and that's the reality.
Long lead times in terms of you've got to forecast your need for these workers too far out?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's even worse than that. The problem is it is a system that was designed to solve a problem. It would be very much like me trying to work on my wife's new car using the tools and equipment that we had when we had Model A's. You know, they're tools that were designed in the 50s to deal with 50s problems, and they simply don't address either the technology we have today or the reality of the shortage.
On the other hand, though, with a guest worker program, aren't we going back to something that we had in the 50s and 60s? Are we returning to an old tool?
Absolutely not. I don't think there's anyone that's talking about a Bracero program. I mean, I worked side by side with Braceros. You know, I was part of what was called the poor white trash generation. And so I can tell you that there's no one that I know of that's talking about rejuvenating a Bracero program. Even the word itself we've tried to get out of people's vernacular. What we're talking about is finding a solution to a very real and critical problem that is going to affect every single American. This is not about the hotel industry, it's not about the construction industry, and it's not about agriculture. This is about America. Yeah. This is about how do we come up with a plan that's going to prevent runaway inflation, that's going to prevent a distortion of our wage base and our prosperity in this country.
Kat, let me loop in the hotel industry here. How real and immediate and critical generally is the labor pool need from your standpoint?
The labor market is very, very tight at this point, and as we were speaking about earlier, not only is the labor market tight, the competition amongst the hospitality industry is great. I mean, even in just the city of Scottsdale, there's so much competition out there. It's the person's choice. If they want a job with the Marriott or if they want a job with, you know, the Phoenician, they can get that job, and they know that. So if they want to work for our company, they have that choice, and that's something that they make.
Is that now a year-round need? I mean,
Pretty much. It used to be to where people didn't come here because it was so hot and they didn't need to vacation here when they could vacation elsewhere, like California or the East Coast. But we see the season ending in May and coming around again in September. So there's only a few months, unlike when it used to be, maybe 6 months, that people didn't come to see us.
And even in those 6 months, we see a lot of conventions being scheduled that historically people just wouldn't come to the Valley of the Sun in June, July, or August. But now we're seeing conventions come because they realize that they have a super deal, getting convention rates and getting service that they don't get in the winter.
Well, Dick, we are hamstrung here because there are no details of this current proposal. They're being worked out, as we mentioned, in Senator Kyle's office, Congressman Colby's office, undoubtedly the 9th floor, a variety of other locations. But let me go back and pick up on Ken's point. If this is not a Braceros type program, it's a guest worker program, what sort of details would you like to see filled in on it?
Well, before you get to that point, I think it's important to commend the governor and to applaud her leadership and her efforts to bring the debate forward. I think that the reality, the status quo as it exists now, is absolutely insanity. We have an unregulated system whereby there's, as your piece indicated, there is tremendous need, tremendous labor shortages throughout the U.S. economy and here in Arizona. And so the governor basically has said, I've seen the situation and I think we need to do something. So what she has done, and in the letter that they've drafted, that Governor Hall and Governor Johnson and Governor Bush have drafted, is to put forward to the Congress and said, we support whatever you're wanting to do and understand that we need your help. So yeah, we don't want to go back to a Bracero program. In fact, that very word is poison to a lot of people in the state. I talked to several of my colleagues and I told them that I was going to be on this program, and they said, we don't want it.
Why? Because it conjures up, let me offer this, it conjures up the images of times when these really weren't guest workers, they were more slaves.
Yeah, because the employer had all the power, and there was no protection under state law. Remember now, the problem with immigration law is that it's really an international law which is enforced by the Congress. The president has very little say in this, other than he can veto a piece of legislation. And
it is a treaty, therefore it is the jurisdiction of the legislative branch.
Well, so what? All right, let's make the assumption.
Back to your
okay,
questions,
right.
and maybe to answer Nick a little bit. The term and even the images it conjures up of workers out there who are getting only 60 cents an hour to work in the fields and working long hours does us a disservice, because we're looking 50 years ago. It would be like me looking down a long road and saying, golly, what's wrong with the power company? APS put little tiny power poles down there. I mean, 50 miles out there, yeah, they look real small. 50 years ago, it looked like we were doing a great disservice, but you have to recognize that disservice wasn't focused on Braceros alone. I was part of the poor white trash that got treated the same way.
Is the base concept, though, that is being discussed here truly temporary workers? And I don't know how you would define temporary. That could certainly be longer than weeks or months, but temporary workers, not permanent residents.
Temporary, controlled, registered, or all terms, and I'm sure Nick has faced that, but the terms that we're hearing bandied around in Congress are, number one, that we want control. We want to know who's here, we want to know what they're here for, we want to know where they're at, and how long it's going to be until they go back home. Those are all things that we do not have today.
It seems to me, though, that if they are temporary workers, that's going to pose a lot of different problems and issues for the employers, including but not limited to housing for those temporary workers, transportation, child care. I mean, a lot of issues, I'm not saying that those don't apply to permanent workers as well, but would apply, I think, a little bit more to a temporary worker.
Right. I would definitely think that we would encourage more of the permanent workers. We don't want our employees to go anywhere if we're going to put the amount of training that the Marriott does do for their associates. I can't see to where we'd want them just to be temporary. We would look more as the permanent market. Even with our seasonal lows, that's when people go on vacation, so we still need people, and we don't let people go just because our seasons are, throughout the September through May.
One of the things back in the Bracero days that many people forget is that there was a provision that allowed a worker to come in. It was fairly cumbersome even in those days as paperwork went, but red tape was not anything compared to what it is today. But the certifications had to occur, and once a person got his card, then it required only the Department of Labor the second year and subsequent year to certify that a need existed, and they didn't have to go through nearly as much red tape that second year or third year. So if you had a trained employee, and you trained him and you got him to where he was an excellent lemon picker, as an example, or he could do certain skilled things, you knew that the following year and the subsequent year you had a 3-year hiatus, that you would be able to use his services and defray the cost of training him.
But Kat, it sounds to me like, based on what you just said, that although that may meet a partial need for the hospitality industry, that would not be the ideal of the hospitality
Exactly.
industry.
And one thing that we do honor at Marriott is that we allow people to transfer to a different department after 3 months, or even to another facility after 6 months. So there are some people that if they want to live in Arizona for the winter months, then they can live on the East Coast, possibly if that's where they want to be, for the summer months. And when it comes to needs such as banquet servers and cooks and things of those positions, then that's what we encourage for them to do.
Nick, would this be an industry-specific kind of program, at least as you would envision it, again, or would it just simply be, no, wherever because we certainly have discussed construction, hospitality, landscaping, farm labor, agriculture, just wherever it might exist?
Well, we have labor shortages, and so I think the governor's saying, I understand that maybe we'll need to start in agriculture, but we need to go to these other sectors of the economy. I mean, just to give you an example, if you've read any of the Federal Reserve's reports, the latest one being August 11th, they report, just about every district reports, widespread labor shortages. Now understand, when we talk temporary, in immigration terminology, temporary could be 6 years. And in fact, those are temporary visas right now. They're called H-1Bs.
Ken, what about details like workers' compensation?
Absolutely.
Other administrative matters in these?
One of the real advantages that I think we would see with a program like this is that it would eliminate the kind of wildcatting, the kind of problems that we see out there with people today, whether it's a construction business or every industry has its bad guys. You know, there are, I don't care whether it's government or whether it's farming, and certainly there are those out there that try to take advantage of the system. What this would do, among other things, is that, as Nick mentioned, you would, once you registered a temporary worker, he would have a tracking, and all of these services to which he is entitled, we would be able to ensure that they're being provided. Currently, we do not have that kind of follow-through. If a worker, an undocumented worker,
Right.
whether he's legal or not, there are a lot of undocumented workers who are perfectly legal but who simply cannot get through the red tape of getting documented. But if he's an undocumented worker, he's at the mercy of that employer.
Quickly,
On wages.
on impact on wages.
I think that the current system is negatively impacting the wages because there is, again, we have a haphazard system where we don't have, we have a number of people who are undocumented in this country, and that's going to stay.
Nic Suriel, thank you very much for joining us. Kat Drum, thanks to you. Ken Evans, good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Tell us what you think about the guest worker proposal. You can contact us by email, voicemail, or send us a letter. Your comments might be used on a future edition of Horizon.